Hello and welcome to the first ever Fantasy Authority podcast, brought to you by thefantasyauthority.com. I am your host, Anthony Pinzone, and alongside me are fantasy experts Kevin Steele, at FantasyWrath13 on the Twitter sphere, and Justin McCasland, aka Macklin J. So how you guys doing tonight?
I'm already having fun.
Lots of fun to be had, guys. Tonight we're going to talk some draft strategy and some quarterback sleepers. And already a huge wrench has been thrown into the running back mix. Arian Foster. News broke all over Twitter today. He tore his groin or something with the groin. He could be out up to 10 weeks. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, it's if the story actually comes out that it's actually he's going to be heading to the IR with eligibility to return, then I mean that's huge for fantasy, and he goes pretty much to almost undraftable. And you look at him as unless you're in some really deep league where you have a ton of bench spots, I probably ain't touching him.
Right, I'm right there with you. At this point, I'm going to be looking at Chris Polk and Alfred Blue as replacements, and probably going to look at them in the 8 to 10 range.
So, Kev, you mentioned that you're not going to touch him here, but what about if you have a deep bench? Say you got a 20-person roster, you got 6 or 7 bench spots. Are you keeping him for the entire year for your playoff run?
Yeah, it depends on where you could get him at. If you could get him in the, a later round pick, if he was there, maybe the 11th, 12th round where you're not really giving up too much to get him, I would consider it then, because I mean, how often are you going to be able to find a running back if he can get back to be healthy and back to be the guy he was this year? I mean, for your playoff run, I mean, you're talking about a guy who put up top 5 running back numbers, so that would be about the only situation that I would think about picking him up. But if you're not, and you're if you have 4 or 5 bench spots, I'm probably not. I'd probably just go ahead and pass on him.
Right, and if you're in a decent, deep enough league, you can hang on to him as long as you can. If you're winning and doing great, that's all right. And if not, you can always trade him away. There's going to be someone that's doing better, and he'll be worth something to someone. I mean, I held on to Josh Gordon for entirely too long last season.
Well, and that could actually play into a draft strategy that you guys really know and love, and that's the zero running back strategy, because if he falls really far and you got your stacked receivers and you're looking at, I don't know, the 11th, 12th round, Arian Foster's still there, it kind of played right into your hands, didn't it?
Of course, yeah. I mean, you're going to be able to take some guys with high upside at the beginning, and that's the ultimate high upside. And there's risk there, but there's risk with the rookies as well, because they may not even win the job.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I'm zero running back strategy team all the way. It's pretty much, I live and die by the strategy, and that's the type of guy that I would definitely, in that situation, you could definitely look to grab, because, like I said earlier, you never know. It's hard to, during the year, there's always the free agent, running backs who come out of nowhere, but overall, to be able to have a guy like that on your bench would be, a good way to go. But at the same time, there's such a huge, he may not even turn out to be anything, and or he may not even get healthy by the end of the year. So you really don't know what you're going to get. But if it was me, I would, like I said, if you had a deep enough bench and I could actually, and I could get him at a good value, I'd probably go ahead and do it.
Right. We've got a comment on the page from Michael TLB, and he's a little scared of zero running back theory. But I mean, if you can get in with the guys. If they're first guys, you pick Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson. You manage to grab like Travis Kelce, or even in the third, taking Aaron Rodgers if he falls to you. You get a few other guys that are your third and your flex, and then manage to get like a Joique Bell, even a Giovanni Bernard, a couple of high upside rookies. What's to be afraid of at that point? If you've got such high production at the top, and everything else is just upside.
So is that the strategy there with a zero running back approach? Or are you just trying to stack the other positions and using your running back as sort of a streaming thing, just trying to get some points out of it?
Sort of, yeah. You are going to take advantage of the position at wide receiver and tight end. Definitely the high end tight end. You don't, after the top 3 guys, maybe 4, depending on your opinion on Jimmy Graham in his new home. You really don't want to jump on those guys too early. But yeah, if you take some high-end wide receivers, you're banking on the fact that that position has a lot less turnover, and that the top 10 guys are typically top 10 guys year in, year out. And only about 40% of the top 10 running backs wind up being top 10 running backs again.
Right. So Kevin, in the zero running back strategy here, what round are you looking to actually take a running back? Because I know I've never done the zero running back strategy, and I'm kind of in the same boat as Michael TLB there, where I'm like, that scares the crap out of me, because I need to have a running back. In all of my fantasy knowledge, you've always been running back first, get that position taken care of, and then move on to a different position. So if I'm not doing that, when am I actually grabbing one?
Well, if you're going to use that strategy, if that's the strategy you're going with, you're going to go with zero running back. What you're going to want to do is obviously, well, first of all, it's relative on where you're picking. So if you have a number one overall pick, then you're not going to use that strategy. It's basically you're going to want to use it if you have the 7th, 8th, whatever, and on pick. And if you have that, it becomes much smarter to go with Antonio Brown or Des Bryant than it's going to be to go with, Matt Forte or Arian Foster before today, or LaShawn McCoy, one of those guys. So you go with that. So you go with Antonio Brown, who's the number one wide receiver, at the position. So you're able to get something there that's a number one overall at the position. And then at the turn, again, you're going to want to go wide receiver, because at that point, running back is falling off a little bit. You're still getting high value there. So then you can go Des Bryant, Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson, anybody there. And then with the 3rd pick, I'm probably maybe go Lamar Miller if you wanted to, but I would probably, it would either be Lamar running back, or if not, I'm going to go Jordan Matthews, I'm going to go Brandon Cooks, and I'm going to have 3 of the top wide receivers already. And so then when I go to get a running back, then that's when I'm going to shift my attention to running back. But then I'm going to go straight just high upside guys. I don't care about I'm looking for the guy who could turn to be the next, the next Le'Veon Bell from last year, or a player like that. So I would go Latavius Murray. Then I would start going T.J. Yeldon and grabbing as many guys like that as I can get. Then the later rounds, I'm going to continue loading up with David Johnson and Buck Allen and all those types of guys. And if you can get those guys and you hit on 1 or 2 of them, you're laughing your way to a championship, because you have 3 of the top wide receivers, plus you just coupled your way into some of the top, you landed on top running back, and did the same thing last year, and hit Jerry. It worked out great. At the start of the year was a little rough. You got to stream a little bit, and you got to really work the waiver wire if you're going to use the strategy. But when you're going with it, you'll find that it's a lot easier, and you're not biting your fingernails every week praying that your top running back doesn't go down.
Right. One of the things we've got a question on Twitter is, how in the world would you manage to get Julio Jones or Calvin Johnson at the top? If everybody's going RB to start out with, sometimes Julio may fall. But I guess that brings up a good point. Kevin and I both would say that we're not going to just jump, even if we've got the number 1, we're probably not going to run with wide receiver. It's really going to be dictated on where you get draft position in the draft. This is best for PPR drafts, and typically in that 7 to 12 range, where the top flight running backs are off the board for sure. Both of us would still employ most often, best available player. We're not going to pick Mike Evans, at number 7, when Eddie Lacy's still available.
I would hope not, guys. You would really shock me if you did that, absolutely. So we have a lot of questions going on about the tight end position. So, if you're not taking a running back and you're looking at tight ends, what tight ends are you considering in those first 4 rounds? Are you only considering a Gronk, or do you have some other guys that you would actually look at in those first 3 or 4 rounds? Go ahead, Kev.
So what tight end would if I'm not going to go Gronk, what tight end? I mean, then I'm not going to take one until later, and then I'll wait it out, and I'll load up on wide receiver and running back. And I'll probably go with like Tyler Eifert, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, somebody like that. I'm not going to go and the only one I would say I really love is Travis Kelce, and I think I'm do Gronkowski. More than likely, if I'm going to draft, I'm not going to take one there until later on.
All right. What about you, Justin? Are you taking one early? Are you taking a Kelce early on?
I would be happy to wind up with one of three guys. Either Gronk, I'll take him in the first. I'd take Kelce in the late second. More likely going to be in the third. I'm going to have a hard time taking him there. But and then Olsen as well. Anywhere back half of the third. But after that, I don't trust Jimmy Graham. It's not that I don't trust Jimmy Graham. It's that I don't trust the Seattle Seahawks and their use of tight ends. And some people will say, well, they've never had a tight end like Jimmy Graham. Okay, I'll give you that. But until there's the chance, it's more like it's the three guys I know are going to produce, or I'm going to wait and take one later.
Right, and I think in my situation, I like to wait on a tight end position, right? Because if I'm not getting Gronk in the late first, which, let me tell you, if I'm getting Gronk in the first round, there better not be any high-end elite receivers left. The only other guy I'm looking at that point is Olsen, because he's the only one that can put up points consistently. Travis Kelce has huge upside, but he hasn't done it yet for me, so I can't waste a high-end pick on that. So I'm looking at guys like Vernon Davis is going undrafted, Charles Clay is going undrafted. You got to figure Buffalo's going to do something with him after all the money they spent on him. So I'm willing to wait towards the later rounds to go with the tight end. Of course, the zero running back approach is something that you guys live and breathe by. So what about the traditional two running back approach? This is something that I usually go with. This is something that, a lot of fantasy footballers have been told for years and years and years, you must take a running back with the first two picks. Why or why not would somebody still go about that?
Well, I think because it's not 2003 anymore. I think things have changed. If you just look at the numbers by themselves, I think it was, I looked at this a while back, and, with running backs getting 300 carries a season was a norm. You saw that with 15 or 16 guys that every year were getting 300 carries, and that's what the offense ran through. We didn't see these high-flying passing offenses as we see now. And so in today's game, it's totally different now. And now, really, you have four guys who I think you feel the best about, which be Jamal Charles, Le'Veon Bell, Adrian Peterson, and
Eddie Lacy.
And Eddie Lacy. And then after that, it becomes a really big crapshoot after that. You don't know what you're getting. Is a guy going to stay healthy? Look at Marshawn Lynch, for example. The guy, how much does he have left? He's been ridden hard. Plus, now he's got back problems. You can start going through and start looking at the guys and who could be there, and it's so risky to take one of those guys. You're hinging a good portion of your fantasy season on taking a guy like that, and if they don't pan out, look at the years past. I can go through and tell you guys, the CJ Spiller, Zach Stacy, all those guys were supposed to be top 10 guys when you look at the preseason.
Doug Martin.
Yeah. They're not even just sort of busts. They're huge busts. And they're guys that just ruined your fantasy season, and if you look at wide receivers, you don't see it as much. Even last year, Calvin Johnson was a guy who didn't have a Calvin Johnson-like season, but he still had 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. Yeah, you're expecting as the number one wide receiver off the board, but at least he still, there was still weeks where he was actually serviceable. If you drafted Zach Stacy last year, which I'm hoping you didn't take him, first round, he was still placed as a top 10 guy. Then he ruined your season, even if you took him as your second running back. I just feel like there's so much. You're setting yourself up to failure if you do that. And I think you're so much safer by just taking your receiver and somebody who you feel pretty confident about. I think if I said barring injury, you could name 8 or 9 receivers, and you're pretty much guaranteed they're going to finish somewhere in that top 8, barring some sort of injury. If they don't, I think you're going to count on him being there. So that to me, that's why I don't like going. I hate if I get a top pick. I am so angry. I'd rather just trade the pick because I do not want that. But
so does it just? I think it makes more sense, honestly, to just go with the best player available, because if you don't want to force yourself to draft a position if the value isn't there. So if you start off in one of those top 4 picks, you're going to want to take one of those top 4 running backs, I think, because you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you don't. But just because you got one in the first round doesn't mean you have to draft another running back on the turnaround. All right, if you're staring at Jeremy Hill, and you're staring at, let's say, I don't know, maybe a Marshawn Lynch lasts to the end of the second round, and you're not comfortable with those guys, and there's also, I don't know, A.J. Green still on the board, you're probably better off going with A.J. Green than you are going with one of the other two.
I agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's, and I think that's where people get caught up when it comes to draft strategy, is they feel like, if you go into anything saying, okay, I'm using zero running back strategy, that's the strategy I'm using, I think you're going to hurt yourself, because it all depends on, one, where you're picking. So if you have the number 1 overall pick, no, you shouldn't take a wide receiver unless you're in like a PPR league, then you could make a case for Antonio Brown or something. But just in a standard league, you're not going to do that. So you have to go off, where you're at, the hand you're dealt. And things can get crazy. If you're in the 7th pick and you say, okay, well, I should take a wide receiver, and somehow, people are afraid of Le'Veon Bell's 2-game suspension, he falls to you, I'm taking him all day. I don't care about the strategy anymore. It's about
absolutely
at the right position, and building the best team possible, and not trying to peg yourself into one strategy, or this is how I have to do it, and this is the way I should do it. You should just go off of, like I said, best player available, and do your research and do your homework, and it becomes pretty easy.
And like you said, not painting yourself into a corner with a certain strategy. I think that when we talk about these strategies, it's something you can go into with the mindset when you know that I've got, draft position 12 or draft position 8, and say, well, okay, I'm going to shoot for 0 RB. But like you said, if it falls to you, it falls to you. Same thing with running back. It's crazy to want to take, like you said, Anthony, to take, say, Arian Foster with his risk history, not before, I know it's a little tongue-in-cheek knowing what we know now, but even before that, it was risky to take him versus someone like Alshon Jeffrey. Alshon Jeffrey is going to be a target monster this year in Chicago. There's no one else to really throw the ball to that is on the same level as Brandon Marshall. And so it's just a safety thing on that.
So with that said, do you guys put any stock into, so you're in a 12-team league, any stock into the tight end first or quarterback first approach? Because if it's the best player available, say the top 3 receivers are off, the top 6, let's say the top 4 or 5 receivers are gone, the top 6 running backs are gone, you're looking at Gronkowski, Aaron Rodgers, and Andrew Luck. You pull the trigger on one of those guys, or are you going with the RB7 or the wide receiver 6?
I would absolutely take Rob Gronkowski at that point. If I'm at pick, like you said, 10, 11, 12, and I know I've got the turn coming right afterwards, I know Rob Gronkowski is not going to make it back to me. And there's only going to be 3 or 4 people going off between there. So, yeah, I'd take Rob Gronkowski and have the 20% or whatever difference between him and every other tight end out there difference on a weekly basis. He's essentially like having a second wide receiver 1. Now, the quarterbacks, that's where I'd probably still want to go with a high-end wide receiver or a high-end running back that has, maybe a little bit more questionable but has more upside than taking Andrew Luck or Aaron Rodgers in the first round and then hoping that they fell to me in the second on the turn. Unless it's a 2-quarterback league, then they're not going to be there anyways.
Right. Well, absolutely. 2-quarterback league, we're talking completely different. I mean, if Luck or Rodgers falls to you outside the top 3, maybe top 4 in a 2-quarterback league, you got to go with one of those guys.
Absolutely.
Kev, you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, I'm not personally ever going to take a quarterback. I don't care, like Rodgers or Luck. If they fall to the first, second, or even the third, I'm not taking them. Just because I feel like the position is so deep that, I'm not going to get the same value there, as, I'm not going to get the same value that probably Andrew Luck or Aaron Rodgers can produce, but I'm going to get comparable. If I can get Tony Romo or Tannehill or somebody like that, or even Matt Ryan or somebody like that a little bit later, I would much rather do that than actually be stuck with, and then taking him. And then I feel like the rest of my positions, because if I would much rather have, a top 6 wide receiver, and then still be able to get a quarterback who can put up, 270, 280, 300 points, like one of these other guys, that you're going to get a little later.
Absolutely. And actually, that's a perfect segue into the next topic we have, which is the quarterback sleepers this year. You mentioned Tannehill, you mentioned Romo. They're going later than you would expect. But who's some guys that are going even later that you guys are taking a look at? Justin, who are you looking at this year in the late rounds?
I'm looking for starters for Bradford, for Sam Bradford. At this point right now, according to fantasypros.com, his ADP's number 17 overall for quarterbacks, or 132nd overall. And at that point, you're looking at guys like, let's see, the Arizona defense, Darren Sproles, D'Angelo Williams. They're going before that position, which is absolutely crazy when you think that Sam Bradford has top 5 potential if he stays healthy all season. The Eagles quarterbacks have averaged a little over 18.5 points a game since Chip Kelly took over, and that right there is just fantasy gold.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kev, who's your top sleeper this year?
Well, not necessarily my top, but one of the guys I'm looking at. If you're talking about late round value at quarterback, if you decide to take a second quarterback, or you're in a situation like that, or maybe you feel like you didn't get one of the top guys and you have a deep bench and you want to grab another guy. For me, people are going to be like, "Oh, are you kidding me?" Would be Andy Dalton, because I know a lot of people. He was terrible last year. Let's be honest. He was not good at all, and so for rightfully so, I can understand why people may or not be upset with him and probably wouldn't even think about taking him. Right now he's coming off as a 26 quarterback off the board, but you have to figure in that AJ Green was basically hurt for the entire season last year. No Marvin Jones, no Tyler Eifert. Nobody to throw the ball to. Mohamed Sanu was basically the go-to guy. If you look at them this season, they're all healthy. If they can all stay healthy this season, they have a strong running game. They have a great passing, pass catching running back in Gio. He's set up to be. If he was a top 12 quarterback at the end of the year, I would not be surprised whatsoever. And if you can get him so late, you could easily take a flyer on a guy, stash him away on your bench if you decide to go with second quarterback. Or as a guy, if you're somebody who likes to, you could easily, there's people who string quarterbacks. If you did that, you could also be happy with him. There's a lot of guys there, and he's one that I don't quite understand why people are hating on him so much. But
well, I think they're probably sour from last year, right? Because last year it was a good pickup on the waiver wire for a couple weeks there. He went off, right? He was the best quarterback in like a 4-week span there for a while, and then he just fell off the face of the earth. So I absolutely see the value in Andy Dalton. I don't know if I would go with him, but he definitely has put up points before in a fantasy aspect. Sam Bradford's a little more of a risk, but he could absolutely light it up in that Philly offense. You just never know what Chip Kelly's going to do over there. A guy I'm looking at, and a guy I really like this year, and he's actually pretty popular from what I've seen on Twitter and just in fantasy drafts, is Teddy Bridgewater over in Minnesota. I think with Adrian Peterson back, you got Mike Wallace in there to stretch the defense. You're looking at Charles Johnson, who North Turner has just been going nuts about this offseason. And maybe Cordarrelle Patterson gets in there, a little Kyle Rudolph mix. I really think Teddy Bridgewater finishes this year as a top 10 quarterback. And there's so much changeover each year in the top 10 quarterbacks. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 5 different quarterbacks than last year in the top 10. We have a little more time here. Let's go with one more each, guys. Justin, who's another guy you're looking at here from a quarterback sleeper perspective?
The other guy I'm looking at, late round quarterback, is someone that's going to have opportunity to have a bounce back year, is Colin Kaepernick. Everybody's talking about how their defense is going to be terrible, which with all the drops that they've had in that defense, there's a likelihood that they're going to be playing from behind, which means more passing. they did go ahead and sign Torrey Smith this offseason, and hopefully the familiarity will be easy to find for him and Colin Kaepernick, and him and Anquan Bolden played together in Baltimore, so they should have a pretty good rapport as it is. He's going as the 18th quarterback or 129th overall, very similar to Sam Bradford. I think the upside with Colin Kaepernick is his legs. I mean, if he can get you 600-700 yards running, maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns rushing, you're looking at moving up in the top 10 as quarterbacks. It's not going to take a whole lot to right that ship. I mean, he did spend a good portion of the summer working with Kurt Warner on his throwing motion.
So, G. Morty says they don't draft headaches, i.e. Kaepernick, or flat-brimmed hats. I guess he meant head cases, or the flat-brimmed hats was definitely the line there, though.
Yeah.
So how about you, Kev? Who else you got going on?
Well, the last one, another one guy I really like would be Carson Palmer. That guy, obviously in 6 games last year, he went out with the ACL injury, whatever. But in the 6 games he did play, I mean, he was the man. I mean, throwing for 1,600 yards, 11 touchdowns, 3. If you were to break that down over the entire 16-game schedule, that's 4,600 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 7 picks. I mean, that's top 10 quarterback position right there. And right now, he's currently going off the board as the 23rd quarterback, which to me, I guess I can understand some of the being afraid of him coming back from the injury and everything else. He's 35 years old. Is he going to be able to produce the same way he was last year? But I just look at his situation. They have John Brown, who I love this year. You get him in the 8th or 9th round, you're really happy. Larry Fitzgerald and Michael Floyd. And then with what should be a much better running attack this year with Andre Ellington out of the backfield, and then my favorite guy, David Johnson. He should be a guy you could easily pay. I mean, he could easily turn out to be a top 10 quarterback this year. The situations, as long as he can stay healthy. But so, I mean, he'd be another guy I would definitely take a look at who's not moving up draft boards at all right.
Yeah, absolutely. And Blaskowski says, "Hey, everybody! Carson Palmer's completing passes on television right now. In practice, no defense. You should draft him. I
did see we had one question from G. Morty. Another, who would you take this year in a keeper league? Julio Jones or Kelvin Benjamin?
Well, from that perspective, I'm sorry, it has to be Julio Jones. I'm sorry, I got thrown off a little bit there, but I think you have to go with Julio Jones in this situation. Kelvin Benjamin had a good year, but there's just not a lot of weapons. He's going to be targeted by defenses, and I just think you got to go with Julio on that. Yeah,
I totally agree. All day I'm going Julio there because I mean I've went back and forth on taking Julio, put Julio as my number 1 in my rankings that you can find over on fanstory.com. I've definitely thought about putting him there because if you look and you go back and look at the history with Shanahan and the X receiver, it's crazy. The guy every year that guy gets tons of targets, is in the top 3 in targets. So if you give that to Julio, I mean, the dude's a beast. The biggest question I know people have with him is he actually going to stay healthy all year? Because he seems to get dinged up or he gets hurt. If he can stay healthy, he could easily be the number 1 fantasy wide receiver this year, no question. I like Kelvin Benjamin, but someone with him was last year he was a garbage time king. He put up a bulk of his numbers in garbage time. So me, I want to see a lot more from him this year before I would ever consider taking Kelvin Benjamin over Julio Jones.
Right, and I'm really hoping that Kelvin Benjamin can fix his drops problem. I know that can be coached out of some guys because he can make the big catches, but he'd have the pass right there in his hands and drop it, and maybe they can work on that this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, the half hour went super quick here. It looks like we're out of time already. I think we had some great questions, a great talk today about the strategy, the zero running back. Hopefully we explained that to some people and they have a better understanding of it. We went over the 2 running back start and then some quarterback sleepers. I just want to let the audience know that we will be on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, I think for the rest of the season. Am I correct on that, Kev?
Yep.
Yeah, for the rest
100%.
of the season. And then once the season starts, we'll also have a show on Sunday morning to kind of get you your last-minute roster fixes before the games start. So follow us on Twitter. You can at FF Authority, at FantasyRat13, at McCasland, and at the one and only PZ. We will keep you up to date on the latest fantasy football news, the latest articles that we're producing, and even the latest podcasts. Once again, the website is thefantasyauthority.com. Make sure you check it out. Guys, I had a great time tonight. See you next Tuesday.
Sounds great. Appreciate it, man.
See you guys.
All right, everybody, have a great night.